Hello everyone, hope you all are doing well. My name is Saajid, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a recommendations video wherein I recommend Muslim fiction. These are not non-fiction books, they're not spiritual books or biographies or anything like that. They are fiction stories written by Muslim authors featuring Muslim characters. Some of the stories that I'll be recommending delve into faith and Muslim identity, and some don't and just feature characters who so happen to be Muslim. None of these books are religious or preachy, so if you are a non-Muslim looking to just read interesting stories without being bombarded by any kind of religious agenda, you don't have to worry about that. And if you are a Muslim looking for positive and neutral representations of Muslims and Islam and Muslim communities, then this is an excellent resource for you as well. These are also my absolute favorite fiction by Muslim authors. I've read a ton more than what I'll be recommending today. These are just the books that I own physical copies of, that I've kept and that I bought copies of because I really like them. The first one is the only kids book or middle grade book that I will be recommending, and that is Once Upon an Eid, edited by S.K. Ali and Aisha Saeed. This is a collection of 15 short stories written by different Muslim authors of diverse background. All of them feature kids on Eid, and the purpose of this collection is really just to celebrate the joy and the wonders of Eid, both Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, which are very important days for Muslims across the world. If you're looking for an adorable, wholesome story, especially for younger readers, look no further than this, but I also recommend it to older readers as well, whether you're Muslim or not, because this is a fantastic collection of short stories that I think everybody should read. So now we will be moving on to young adult novels. I have about 11 of them to recommend to y'all, and the first two are by S.K. Ali, who is one of the editors and contributors for Once Upon an Eid, and those books of hers are Saints and Misfits and Love from A to Z. Her debut novel, Saints and Misfits, is a young adult novel that follows a girl named Jana, who was sexually assaulted by a very prominent member of her local Muslim community in Illinois, and she decides to not tell anybody about it because she fears that no one will believe her. So the story is about her struggle bottling this secret up and how she eventually comes to find her voice and stand up for what she believes in. It's a really great story that addresses the kind of toxic culture that exists in some Muslim communities, where we put certain people on a pedestal whilst harshly judging other people, whilst not taking into account that everybody is flawed and no Muslim in any Muslim community is perfect. Her second novel is Love from A to Z, and it's about two teens who meet on a flight to Doha and end up falling for each other. It's a really wholesome romance that does not just focus on the relationship between the two main protagonists, but also focuses on them separately. They're both dealing with things like grief and illness and injustice, and it's about how they are coming to terms with the things in their life as young people who are still learning and understanding the world around them. And it's also about how their two very different stories and paths and journeys intersect when they get to meet each other and get to know each other. One thing that I think a lot of Muslims, especially more conservative Muslims, might appreciate about the story is that the romance does not have any kind of physical intimacy. The two characters don't touch. I don't have an issue with touching or intimacy, of course, but if you are a Muslim who might have more reservations about reading books that feature touching and intimacy, this is definitely a safe one. The romance is definitely what we would conventionally call halal, so you don't have to worry about encountering anything that might make you uncomfortable. And what I appreciate about that aspect of this story is that you feel the connection and the love between these two characters in a way where it doesn't have to manifest into physical intimacy for the reader to really feel that connection. S.K. Ali did a really good job of building the chemistry between these two characters, and I really appreciate the story for that reason. Next up we have All American Muslim Girl by Nadine Jolie Courtney. This is another contemporary novel. Basically all of the YA books are contemporary with the exception of the very last one that I'll be talking about. This one follows a girl named Aliyah, or Ali for short, who very much lives a whitewashed life. Her mother is white and her father is Arab, and she herself doesn't really connect much with her Arab culture, and even though she was raised Muslim, she doesn't really identify as a Muslim because her family doesn't really practice Islam. They just call themselves Muslim. And because she's white, or at the very least white passing, she just pretty much blends into American culture and society until she takes up an interest in both her faith and her heritage. So the story is about her trying to find Islam for the first time, to really learn about it and to start practicing Islam for the first time. So she learns how to pray, she fasts for the first time in Ramadan, and the story is essentially following her journey into Islam. But not just her journey into Islam, it's also about her reconnecting in a way that she never did before with her heritage. As I said, her father is Arab, he comes from Jordan, and his family are descendants of Circassian immigrants, so she is for the first time learning a little bit more about her heritage and reconnecting with that. But the main conflict of the story comes when she meets a boy who she really likes, and she's kind of confused as to whether she should pursue a relationship with him, because conventionally in Islam you're not really supposed to pursue a romantic relationship outside of marriage. So she's a little bit confuffled about that, and it doesn't help that his father is like this very rich and famous like Fox News host who bashes on Muslims in every segment that he has on television in front of millions of people. So it's about her navigating that very interesting situation as well. It's a really great book. Ask any Muslim who read this story. It is one of the best YA novels that represent in a very accurate and wholesome way a young person's rediscovery of Islam. And it was a gorgeous story, beautifully written, wonderful characters, very engaging plot, interesting themes and ideas explored. Definitely give this one a read if you haven't already. Next up we have A Very Large Expansive Sea by Tahira Mafi. Mafi is most known for the Shatami series and I guess furthermore as well, but this was her first contemporary novel and it is brilliant when I tell you. This is set a year after 9/11 and it's following an Iranian-American Muslim girl named Shireen who wears the hijab, and she is of course the target of immense discrimination and ridicule because of the stereotypes that were amplified after the 9/11 attacks. The story centers around a romance. The main character falls for this white boy. It's not like a Netflix show where she takes off her hijab and, you know, runs off into the sunset with him, but essentially she really likes him, but because he's like this all-American star boy, this athlete, this great student, people in the school really value him, and they don't want him to be hanging out with this girl who is seen as the enemy to all things American. So it's about how she's navigating that particular situation, dealing with the discrimination and dealing with people trying to take her away from this guy who she really feels a connection with. It's not like desperate love, you know, because they're like teenagers with hormones in high school, so it's not that deep, but it was really more so about how the people around them interpreted their relationship and how she was kind of seen as like the enemy coming in to corrupt someone who is seen as like the epitome of American society and culture. It was a really interesting exploration of that, and I love this book for that reason. The next two books that I will be recommending are both books that feature queer Muslim characters. So if you are an anti-LGBT Muslim, in addition to me judging you severely, I am forewarning you not to read these books because you're probably going to encounter things that you disagree with or that you don't like. So maybe don't read these books, but if you're a little bit more open-minded, or if you are a queer Muslim yourself and you're looking for more representation and whatnot, definitely give these two books a try. Interestingly, they are both by diasporic Bangladeshi authors. The first one is called The Love and Lies of Roksana Ali. This is a story about this girl named Roksana whose mother one day finds out that she is a lesbian and is not okay with this, so she takes her to Bangladesh and tries to get her into an arranged marriage to cure her of her lesbianism. And the story is about how she is, of course, navigating that very difficult situation. And right away, this is a really difficult story to read. It's very heavy, very extreme, so if that's not something that you think you'd be able to stomach or something that you don't think you want to read, maybe you might want to give this one a skip. But if you think you could handle it, I highly recommend it because it's such a compelling story and such a heartbreaking story as well, but one that really stuck with me. This was like my favorite book of 2019 and still one of my favorite books till this day. I absolutely love this story and I couldn't recommend it enough. Next up we have The Hanawas by Adiba Jaigirdar. This is set in Ireland and we are following our main protagonist Nishat, who decides to start a henna business for this business assignment that she has in school. The only problem is that this girl in her class, Flavia, decides that she wants to start a henna business too, and Nishat is upset for multiple reasons. Not only is Flavia her biggest crush and she has to compete with her crush, she is kind of upset with Flavia because she feels as though as if Flavia is appropriating her culture by you know, doing henna and profiting off of it. So the book addresses homophobia because Nishat is trying to come out to her very conservative Muslim Bengali parents, and at the same time it addresses cultural appropriation because that's something that she's also kind of thinking through with regards to Flavia also doing henna. But in addition to dealing with like those topics and whatnot, it is just such a light-hearted, fun, humorous, wholesome story and a beautiful romance between two young queer black and brown girls. If that is something that you're starving for, please look no further than this book because it is a wonderful story and more people need to be reading it. The next two books that I have to recommend are by one of my favorite YA authors, and that is Randa Abdel Fattah. She's a well-known Australian author, known mostly for writing about the Arab and Muslim Australian experience. So I have 10 things I hate about me and the lines we cross. And the lizard apparently has something to say too. So 10 Things I Hate About Me is a story about this girl named Jamila who does not want anybody in school to know that she is Arab and Muslim, because she knows that she will be the subject of discrimination and bullying because of her very racist, predominantly white school environment. So she dyes her hair blonde and wears blue eye contacts and goes by Jamie instead of Jamila, and tries to blend into white Australian culture, even though she herself is a young Arab Muslim woman. It doesn't just focus on her school life, but it also focuses on her home life and her Lebanese family, and it's about her just kind of balancing these two worlds. It's like Hannah Montana, but if Miley was like not famous and was a Muslim from Australia. I really enjoyed this story. It's not perfect by any means, and you kind of have to suspend your disbelief a little bit. It's a little ridiculous because it's kind of like a middle YA book that was published in the early 2000s, but if you could suspend your little disbelief and accept the story for what it is, I definitely think you should give it a try because it is a really fun story. The Lines We Cross is a more recent book from Abdel Fattah, and it is a story about these two teens who end up really liking each other but come from completely different worlds. It's also published as When Michael Met Mina in Australia, and it follows Michael and Mina. Michael comes from a very conservative white family. His parents are very right-wing. They own this right-wing organization. They're very anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, you know, high-key racist, whereas Mina comes from a refugee background. She is a refugee from Afghanistan. She is a Muslim. She's everything Michael's family despises. So the book doesn't just follow their romance, but it follows their two very separate journeys as well. Michael, through meeting Mina and getting to know her and getting to learn about her experience, starts to realize that the things that he's always accepted as wholesale from his parents might not be completely true at all. And Mina is still very much like years later dealing with the trauma of coming over from Afghanistan as a refugee. She lost her father and her brother back in Afghanistan along with other family members. So it's about her coming to terms with the things that has happened to her over the years and coming to terms with this new hostile environment that doesn't fully accept her and sees her as other. It's a really cool and interesting story, and it is definitely one of my favorites, if not my favorite YA book of all time. Next up, we have Written in the Stars by Aisha Saeed. Saeed is also editor and contributor for the Once Upon an Eid collection. This is a story about this girl named Nyla who is from the States, and she ends up disrespecting or disobeying her parents, and they try to take her back to Pakistan to put her in an arranged marriage. Kind of like The Love and Lives of Roksana Ali, this book is a little extreme and some people criticize it for being a bit stereotypical of Pakistani culture. The book itself doesn't really talk a lot about Islam. It doesn't ever explicitly mention Islam or Muslim, even though you know that the lizard has something to say again. Even though you know that the family in the book are Muslim, it doesn't really talk about Islam. It's more so meant to kind of criticize certain aspects of Pakistani culture. I can't speak to whether this book over-exaggerated or stereotyped Pakistani culture. I don't think it's an amazing book by any means, but it is a very, very sentimental book for me because it is the first book that I've ever read by a Muslim author that features Muslim characters, A. And B, it was the book that got me into making videos about books online. When I first read this book, I think this year will make it 6 years ago, I had nobody to talk to about it. So I just decided to upload a video onto YouTube. My very first video ever was a review of this, and it changed my life. So I kept this book all these years for sentimental reasons, because outside of the story itself, it means a lot to me. And then the last young adult novel that I have to recommend is a sci-fi novel, and that is Light at the Bottom of the World by London Shah. This is set in a futuristic underwater London where the entire world has been submerged under the ocean, and everybody has to live in like waterproof buildings and bubbles now. Very interesting world, gorgeous world building. The main character in this book is Muslim. She is a practicing Muslim, and the story itself does not focus on anything to do with Islam or culture whatsoever. It's about her trying to run away from the corrupt government in this like submarine, and then there's these like killer mutant mermaids that are like trying to like bite her head off. So she's like trying to get away from all the people who want to like, you know, detain her and kill her and whatnot. So it's like an intense sci-fi story. The character in this book is like unapologetically, unquestionably Muslim, and I just appreciated that, you know, because I feel like sometimes with sci-fi and some of these kind of more speculative genres, they kind of tend to like, you know, ignore religion or push it to the side. But Islam is like it's not a huge part of the story, but it is something that is deeply important to the main protagonist. One of the things that people in this world suffer from is seasickness, which is basically a coded term for depression, because everybody in this world intensely misses the life above water. Everybody misses life on land. Everybody is nostalgic about it, and a lot of people end up committing suicide and suffering with seasickness because they miss life on land. And Islam is actually a huge coping mechanism for our main protagonist. Her faith and her commitment to her faith is what keeps her sane and what protects her from seasickness. And I think that is so beautiful. Even though the story itself has nothing to do with her culture or her faith or with Islam whatsoever, I just thought that the way that Islam was incorporated into it was beautiful, and it made sense to the story as well. So that might have been a little bit overwhelming. That was a lot of young adult and middle grade and stuff. So the last 6 books that I'll be recommending to you all today are all adult novels. The first 2 are Caribbean or West Indian books. As most of you all know, I'm from Trinidad and I have a deep adoration for Caribbean and West Indian fiction, and I especially love it when I come across books by Caribbean Muslim authors. So the first one that I have to recommend is set in Trinidad, and it is called The Yard by Aliyah Inayat. It is about this one extended Muslim family who all live in this compound together called The Yard. It focuses on different characters, but the main focus of the story is Maya and her adoptive brother Beiruz, and them growing up together and the very complicated relationship that they share. It is the only contemporary book that I have read and that I even know of that follows a modern Indo-Trinidadian Muslim family, and it does a really good job at exploring that cultural context. I didn't really relate to like the individual characters in this book, but the story and the community that they're from and their culture and the things that they do and how they practice their faith really resonated with me because it is very much similar to the kind of environment that I grew up in as well. So this is a really great piece of West Indian fiction, and it's also a great look into a Muslim Caribbean experience. And so is, to an extent, Asylum Life by Ryan Shah. Now, right away, the Muslim family in this book are not really religious at all, so Islam is not hugely discussed in the story, but it's definitely there, and it definitely has a potent presence in the book. The main character of the book is Aliyah, and we're also following her over the course of a couple of decades, from when she's a child to when she's like middle-aged or so. She has always had a very deep fascination with her grandmother, who is a very silent woman, and she gets to learn throughout the course of her life why her grandmother is the way that she is, because she begins to have these very interesting visions, which are written in a sort of fabulous way. They just happen and they're not really questioned in the story. She just has these visions of her grandmother's past, and as she grows up, she's slowly but surely learning what happened to her grandmother to make her silent, what traumatized her to make her become that person. And it also kind of dawns on the main character after a while that history is repeating itself, and some of the things that happened to her grandmother are also happening to her. It's really a story about mental health and intergenerational trauma, but it's one that celebrates heritage and knowing your history and knowing where you came from and honoring that, and I really, really adore this story for that reason. I really want to read more by Ryan Shah. She does have like 1 or 2 other books that I think follow Muslim families as well, so I'm looking forward to reading more from her in the future, definitely. I don't know if I forgot to mention this, but this book is set in Guyana, which is a Caribbean country. It's not an island, it's a South American country, but it is considered part of the Caribbean as well. So yeah, if you're looking to read more Guyanese fiction or more books set in Guyana, read this one too. Next up, we have Hijab and Red Lipstick by Yusra Imran. This is probably like the book that I read most recently from this batch, and this is a story about a British Muslim woman named Sarah who is being interviewed by a woman who works for the BBC that wants to make a documentary series about Sarah's life. Sarah has had a considerably tumultuous life. When she was a child, her father moved the family to the Gulf, and she grew up there essentially for a very long time. And whilst living there, her father began subscribing to a more fundamental strand of Islam that conflates male superiority and patriarchy and toxic male culture with Islam, and that uses Islam or warps Islam to justify, narratives of sexism and male supremacy, which inevitably had aversive effects on Sarah, her mother, and her sister. So the book is following how, this kind of subscription to a more fundamental strand of Islam could really negatively affect the lives of women and girls. The book is actually based off of the author's own experiences, as well as the experiences of young women that she knew who also grew up in the Gulf. And the book is not meant to stereotype Islam in any way, or to say that Islam is bad or patriarchal or that all Muslim women are oppressed. It just addresses some very, deep-seated issues that exist in many Muslim communities globally, right? there's a way to talk about the problems that exist in the Muslim community, whether it be sexism or homophobia or racism, without stereotyping the religion of Islam as a sexist or homophobic or racist religion. There's a way to have these conversations with a level of nuance, and I think that the author does a really good job of doing that in this book. And it was really interesting to see that the main character herself does not associate Islam and her love of her faith and her religion with the toxic male patriarchal culture that is being conflated with Islam. Throughout the book, we see her dealing with abuse and assault and injustice. It's a really, really difficult story to read because it addresses those topics in a very explicit and upfront way. But at the end of it, she still claims her space within her faith, and she doesn't allow these things to color her perception of Islam. And that's what I appreciate about this story the most. It's a really, really interesting book that I think everybody should give a try to. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely think that it is one that you will enjoy as well. So don't stereotype this book as anti-Muslim or as stereotypical towards Muslim communities. Definitely give it a try and give it a read because it's worth it. The next book that I have here is The Map of Salt and Stars by Zain Jukadar. This is a story that is set throughout the Middle East and North Africa. It's about this young girl whose family leaves New York and goes back to their homeland of Syria after her father passed away, and they don't spend too long there until their neighborhood is bombed and they end up having to seek refuge in different countries across the Middle East and North Africa. We're also reading a story, a fictional story within this story that the main character's father used to tell her about this brave woman who pretended to be a man so that she can go on this epic journey with a map maker to map the world. And we're reading these two stories simultaneously, and we see that there are a lot of parallels between them. What's happening in the fictional story is in different ways manifesting itself in the actual story of Noor, our main protagonist. It's a really good story that addressed like gender roles, history, and Middle Eastern culture. It's a book that it read like a love letter to the Middle East, and it's also a book that deals with the refugee crisis. Again, it doesn't really focus too much on Islam, but it's still a really good book, and if you're looking to read something by an Arab Muslim author about an Arab Muslim experience, read this book. Next up, we have The Beauty of Your Face by Sahar Mustafa, which is a story about a Muslim woman named Afaf, who is the principal of a Muslim girls' high school in Chicago. One day, a white supremacist terrorist shooter comes to the school and begins attacking students and ends up in a confrontation with Afaf. So that is like the center of the story, and from there we just go back into a bunch of flashbacks into Afaf's life growing up as a working class Palestinian immigrant in Chicago, and we do get some small flashbacks into the terrorist's life as well. What's really interesting about this story is that it really focuses on Afaf's journey into Islam. She grew up in a Palestinian Muslim family, but her parents were not very religious. The home environment was very dysfunctional and toxic because her parents didn't get along. Her older sister went missing, which devastated and traumatized the family, and it's about how she kind of dealt with that growing up, and eventually she found Islam, which became her coping mechanism. However, she would soon learn that the Muslim community is considerably toxic. As much as Islam is a beautiful religion and is a coping mechanism, there's a lot of toxic things within the Muslim community that she had to contend with and confront. So the story explores how she navigated that, and it also addresses obviously like racism and Islamophobia in the context of the school shooting. I enjoyed this book for what it was. It has deeply impacted me, and I still think about it till this day. So if you haven't read this book as yet, please do. And finally, the last book that I have to talk about in this video is one of my favorite books of all time, one of the most beautiful books that I read, and one of the few books in life that has made me cry. I don't think any of the other books that I mentioned in this video have ever really made me cry. This book had me sobbing, and that is of course A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. This follows an Indian immigrant Muslim family living in Southern California, and basically we start at a wedding where one of the daughters of the family is getting married, and the son, who has been estranged for like 3 years, comes to the wedding for the first time and sees his family for the first time in a long time. From there we get flashbacks into their lives growing up, and it's very non-linear. 1 minute we're in their childhood, 1 minute where they're in their 20s, 1 minute they're adolescents. So it really goes back and forth, and it seems kind of confusing at first, but when you get into it and when the story, you know, continues and carries on, it starts to make sense, and you start to see why this young man had such a tumultuous relationship with his family and what drove him away from them in the end. It, you know, addressed how religious families often have these crazy expectations for children and don't necessarily consider who they are and what their needs might be. They just emphasize on the expectations that they have of their children. So when their children don't live up to the expectations, they become disappointments. And that's essentially what the story is addressing. But it also looks at other things too. I also like that this is a story about a Shia Muslim family. Usually pretty much all of the books that I've recommended so far were predominantly Sunni experiences, whereas this book is an explicitly Shia story, and I really appreciated that as well. I loved reading about all of the different characters and their journey into their faith. It's just there's so much that I could say about this book, and I would be here for hours if I have to. All I can say is that it's extremely heartbreaking but also heartwarming. It's tragic and sad, but also beautiful and hopeful. It's beautifully written, amazing characters who will haunt you for the rest of your life. Please pick up A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. It's great. And that, my friends, concludes this very long video, what I anticipate will be a very long video. I hope you got some amazing recommendations. I hope you decide to try some of these books. If you have read any of them before and you have any thoughts on them, please share it with me in the comments down below. I would love to know. That being said, thank you all ever so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely, lovely day, and until next time, inshallah, keep reading.
Oh, yeah.